also got the managing partner of Chiming Venture Partners, Nisa, and she leads the healthcare investment. She's on the Forbes Midas list and the Forbes Best Women VCs list as well as Fortune's most powerful women in business. So we've got two fantastic investors to speak to us today. How do you define longevity?
Well, thank you so much, Edie. Thank you, Nisa. And thank you to the FII Institute for hosting this incredible gathering. And thank you to Hong Kong for having us here for the inaugural FII. I think when we think about longevity, it's not just about increased life. Obviously, that is a goal. But if we increase lives, and we increase those lives and they're not healthy lives, that is bad for the system. That's bad for humanity. It's bad from a family unit standpoint. The key is health span. We want to live longer lives, but we want to live lives that are productive, that are healthy. We want to be staying out of the doctor's office. We want to be staying out of the hospital. So the key is health span, living well, living healthy, and living without disease and without ailments. To get there is a function of preventative medicine, good lifestyle, eating well, exercise, sleep. It's early diagnosis of diseases when you get them very early to be able to rid yourself of the disease. You never want to find yourself in a disease in its later state. And with doing that, utilizing the two new technologies that are available to do it, we're going to have a world with increased health span, not just increased lifespan.
Nisa, how do you define longevity?
I think that for us, we look at same thing as Josh, but at the same time we also compare the difference between longevity in developed countries versus developing countries. So naturally we are also identifying lots of ways to look for prevention, but also treatment for communicable as well as uncommunicable diseases. So, and I think one of the things that we'll probably talk about also is life expectancy and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I think, so we've been looking at, there are lots and lots of new technologies and diagnostic and treatment that we're looking into for longevity. So it's a very interesting topic right now, very hot.
What do you think is the innovation that you believe is the most promising at the moment for extending a healthy human life?
The new area of therapeutics, we're seeing data already in animals, in mice, in monkeys, in pigs, and we'll start to see translation into humans, is a new modality of therapeutics called rejuvenative medicine. This is an area where a researcher in Kyoto University won the Nobel Prize, Shinya Yamanaka. It was advanced by a Spanish scientist who his lab is in San Diego, Juan Carlos Belmonte, and effectively it says that every cell in your body can be reversed back to any point in its continuum. You can change the epigenetic clock of that cell to express itself at any point. More importantly, if you keep the expression to the end of puberty, cellular identity is maintained. So heart stays heart, liver stays liver, kidney stays kidney. So what this means is if you apply these, they're called Yamanaka factors after the founder, if you apply these Yamanaka factors to cells, you can reverse back aging. You can reverse back a cell to before the point where it gets disease. If you're genetically predisposed to get a certain disease or ailment, you can reverse back the clock of the cellular cells or organ to way before you would be in a potential to statistically get that disease. So we're going to see a lot of data coming out in humans in this area, in rejuvenative medicine, and this area has the potential to completely transform therapeutics over the next decade.
In my head, I'm still 21, so I think that would be nice if the rest of my body kept up with that thought. Nisa, what about you? What's the innovation you think has the most promising for extending a healthy life?
I think besides cell regeneration and so forth, we've invested in quite a few companies in diagnostic, including one which is a super microscope where we could be looking at a live cell, how they interact with drugs as we speak. So, this product is flying off the shelf to lots of academic institutions, R&D centers, and so forth. But at the same time, we're also looking at what are some of the diseases that people have when they get older. Alzheimer, that's an area that we've been looking at, and in fact, we have just invested in a company that's probably one of the leading early stage Alzheimer diagnostic with a simple blood test. And we're trying to get that to a very affordable price so that it becomes perhaps an annual checkup globally as a screening device. At the same time, treatment, cancer, and a whole lot of other things. I think, there's some figures saying that 50% of Alzheimer, 50% of people over 85 years old have Alzheimer or potential. So could we be looking at some of the old, pedal diseases and whatnot? And then, of course, other areas such as menopause. And so there are lots of disease areas that we're also focusing on, as well as, how do we do cell regeneration? Yeah.
Interesting. So the WHO, I do a lot of work with them. They track longevity around the world. It has been improving evenly, not evenly, but steadily. But there's an unnerving detail in this, and that is around the fact that life expectancy is growing more quickly than what the WHO calls healthy life expectancy. So the quality of our life is not keeping up with our ability to extend it. So are we even focused on the right priority? Should we be trying to extend human life, or should we just focus on more healthy lives for as long as we can live them?
I think it's really about health span. And I think if we think about getting a disease and the necessity for therapeutics for that disease, this is obviously very bad for the patient, but it's also very bad for the system. Therapeutics are extremely expensive, especially if we think about the cutting-edge therapeutics that are coming out, especially for oncology, cell and gene therapies, where the cost of each treatment is many hundreds of thousands of dollars in the US, completely unaffordable for the vast majority of the world and the vast majority of Americans, for that matter. So really, there needs to be much more focus on preventative medicine. There needs to be much more focus on early diagnosis. There needs to be much more focus on healthy living. It is through that way that we will be able to live longer, we will be able to live healthier, more productive lives, and the tax and cost on the system will be a lot less. But having said that, some people, sadly, will still get ailments. Some people will still get diseases of morbidity. And I think it's very important to focus on how do you take these therapies and how do you produce them cheaper, faster, better. The big bottleneck in the pharmaceutical industry is in two areas. The bottleneck is in drug development, human trials. This has just become longer and longer and taken more and more time, more and more cost, and in manufacturing. How do we do human trials cheaper, faster, better? How do we manufacture everything from small molecules and vaccines all the way to these cutting-edge novel immunotherapies, cell and gene therapies? How do we manufacture them at cents on the dollar? If we could increase the speed and velocity of development and manufacturing and bring down the cost of development and manufacturing, we will have many more therapies on the market at a much lower cost. So first is prevention, second is early diagnosis, and third is if you get a disease state, working towards a paradigm where we've really brought down the whole cost curve of the industry.
How can China help? What has China learned about delivering innovative treatments at lower cost, Nisa?
Well, this is the thesis of really what we've been investing, why we've been investing in healthcare in China. We've invested in about 220 companies so far. And I think from the example, one of the things that we're seeing is at the beginning, 20 years ago, China used to develop sort of the copycats and whatnot, whatever the market has. All the way to now, this year, this is the first time ever innovative drug licensed from China to global has now exceeded the number of innovative drug licensing from global to China. And that's huge. When I was catching up with the global CEO of Sanofi a few weeks ago in Shanghai, he said this is his third time visiting China this year. And most of the CEOs of Big Pharma have been in China this year. And I think what's really interesting is they see that China is able to develop some of the innovative drugs and be able to reiterate so much faster so that they can actually develop the best-in-class global drug for the world. And there were a few drugs that were approved, developed from China for global, and they were just recently approved by US FDA for the US market. The sales price in US is actually 20 times more than the sales price in China. Now, but it is still 20% lower than what they're selling it at, by the competitors and whatnot. So my question is, at some point, we would really like to see that when drugs are launched in US, we could be launching them in the developing countries at the same time at a much cheaper price. And US can pay whatever they like. But if we can provide affordable and innovative diagnostic or devices or therapeutic, that may make a huge difference. And I want to make an example is when AstraZeneca, when they sell their targeted therapy in US, they use a companion diagnostic, and they would use this test to check whether or not the patient have a gene mutation before they apply that drug. And that test costs about $1,000 US. Now, when they try to launch this drug in Africa, they just couldn't afford having a $1,000 test. So what they did is they partnered with one of our companies who has exact same companion diagnostic, but for $10 US. So they launched that together in Africa, and AZ was able to lower the prices, but now all of a sudden the whole Africa was able to benefit from it, and that's great.
That's great.
Josh, I wonder if you want to touch on the intellectual property aspect, but I want to make sure we get to the other issue you mentioned a moment ago, which is the manufacturing crisis. When I was speaking to Lady Rosalind earlier today, she was saying how much China, India had helped with the manufacturing of the COVID-19 drugs, that really helped get them out to the world. Now, whether they were distributed equitably is another question. But give me your sense of IP and also how that relates to manufacturing.
Absolutely. I think here the maxim, more is more, is really applicable. The reality is for first-in-line treatments, that IP needs to be really protected. That the scientists that are able to go from 0 to 1 and create something that's not incremental change, but a step function change in therapies, these individuals, these scientists, and the companies that champion these first-in-line novel treatments, they need to be rewarded. The IP needs to be protected. They need to be able to get great rents over the life of the IP, or else many others won't follow in their footsteps. People won't go to PhDs and at top universities and want to go do what these individuals did to create cutting-edge step function changes in therapies. So first-in-line treatments are very important, and for the most part, though there's scope to bring the cost down, they're always going to be very expensive. But to Nisa's point for second, third, fourth-in-line treatments, where you can have incremental change, the IP here and protection of IP is very important. But this is where you really can bring pricing down. You can really bring pricing down, and you can increase your TAM to a much larger population base, to the global south. And this is where, obviously, manufacturing, doing things cheaper, faster, better on the manufacturing front can really play a big difference. So I think it's important as investors that we think about funding novel therapies and funding things that are Mars shots. Because if we don't fund the Mars shots, we will never be able to have step function changes in therapies. But at the same time, as investors, we also want to fund and invest and build companies that are lower risk, where you do have incremental change. Because that incremental change could be traumatic change for a much larger set of the population. And at the end of the day, from a business standpoint, if you're selling to a much larger market, a much larger TAM, even if your margins are less, you could still have very good EBITDA over time.
Give me a sense of AI. I think if the AI listens to this whole conference, it's going to be very pleased because of the amount of times it's been mentioned. Give me a sense of what you see the most important use of AI right now is in your investments, and what you're most excited about, Nisa.
Well, we've been quite active in investing in digital health and AI health, and we're probably one of the first people to invest in AI drug discovery. So we're a very early investor, which is a New York-based CADD company, Recursion, and then in silico and I think in silico, they're probably one of the first generative AI drug discovery company. They were set up in 2013, 14. And what's really interesting now is they are probably one of the first one to be able to use AI to identify a target, and then also use AI to design a molecular structure. And these drugs have now gotten US FDA approval, and then also China FDA approval to go into clinical trial. And they're now in phase 2 clinical. And we still have a pipeline of 20, 30 drugs behind us that are getting ready to go into. And I think, one of the things that we tell the company is, if we can get, the key thing is we have to look at the clinical data. And if the clinical data looks good, then this will actually demonstrate to the world that we could use AI to speed up drug discovery. And that's huge.
Yeah.
And beyond that, we also have quite a few companies in clinical development that is helping. But of course, AI, we have companies in AI pathology, AI imaging, AI in internet hospital, and so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot of areas that we could be expanding into.
Josh?
Healthcare is 20% of US GDP, 14% of global GDP. And 100% of it over time will be impacted and disrupted by AI. Today, what we're seeing is that workflows are already improving dramatically. You think about medical records in a hospital. AI is already increasing the accuracy of these medical records, is taking away a lot of the human cost and labor of inputting these human records, and is improving a lot of the processes. We are beginning, as Nisa mentioned, to see companies that are using AI for imaging analysis. You get a CAT scan or MRI scan using AI to assist the doctor in looking at that image. You're having companies like in silico and in sitro and others that are focusing on AI for drug discovery. And I'm very, very hopeful that some of these companies will be able to get to drugs that get approved by the FDA. This will be magical, and I think will unleash many, many more drugs as a result of AI for drug discovery. But if we think about healthcare writ large, be it robotic surgery and the impact that AI will have on robotic surgery, we think about the Da Vinci system and what that has done. That can be scaled across all areas of surgery over time. So AI will disrupt everything. And I think at the end of the day, thinking about it philosophically and from a large standpoint, if you're really good at your game, if you are excellent, and you're able to take your excellence and take your skills and amplify it and use the power of AI, you will be 10x, 100x more powerful. But if you don't, if you're second tier, third tier at your game, and you try and reject AI, you're going to be a dinosaur. You're going to be finished. I think the best and brightest in all areas, and specifically healthcare, need to actively embrace AI, and it'll make a dramatic difference for human health outcomes.
Nisa, OECD says there's a huge gap between rich countries and poor countries in terms of investment in medical research and development. How do we keep this from becoming yet another source of growing inequity?
I think, one of the things that, R&D research, there's quite a bit of research going on in China, but they're also ramping up. But one of the things is, I think China can do much better when it comes to translation from lab to commercial. So that's something that we're working very closely with some of the KOLs. We're working with quite a few universities and the medical school deans and whatnot to incubate some of the companies and products. So hopefully, at some point we will see great demands. But I think, one of the things, the Alzheimer diagnostic is actually from a university.
Interesting.
So.
I'm being told that we've got to wrap this up. I've got 4 more questions for you. We're going to have to leave it there. And I would like to encourage everyone in the audience to ask Josh about the need for governments to fund non-applied science to improve the health of future generations. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a huge round of applause. Thank you very much, Nisa and Josh.
Thanks.
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Edie.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.